We got to break Sariba up. Sariba is a cartel. We have to own our grid because we paid for it. You had it too long. That's number one. We need to control the purchasing of fuel because we pay for it. We should be in charge of buying it. The fuel companies, you better buckle up too. Jackson Point pipeline have to be reverted back to the ownership of the country. Oh, Mario, you can't tell them how to operate their business. Well, yes, we can. Having this idea that you're going to impose what's best because of what the law tells you can do will cause an uprising in this country that you've never seen before. My children are going to be saddled with the debt of a billionaire so that he can have his name printed on everything we got around here. Because, let me tell you something, this is Dart Island. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to Word of Mouth. I know that it's an hour later than we normally start. Obviously, we had a few things we had to get done this morning. And, I just wanted to make sure that we had the show today in any regards, because Monday, Wednesdays, Fridays is our primary days that we want to air live. A lot has happened since Monday, obviously. I know that's, the situation that came up yesterday with the government is fresh on everybody's mind, and it's one of the things that are on the forefront that being talked about. Obviously, there's going to be a lot of speculation as to what happened, what didn't happen. Unfortunately, we still, in some ways, depending on who you are and what it is you represent, we still find ourselves, being tempted. In some people cases, they cave into the inability to control themselves. But yet, I'm still trying to figure out the relevancy of a lot of things that was said by Sandra Catron this morning in regards to myself. But I made a promise to my platform and to my viewers that I would never take on board any back and forth dispute or conflict with Sandra Catron, simply because I don't have the energy and time to feed into the foolishness sometimes. But because it was brought to my attention this morning, I had no plans or any indication that I would speak anything about what someone else said in regards to this matter that's happening with the PAC government, Christopher Saunders, more specifically. But someone brought to my attention that she chose to call my name in a very negative light. Now, obviously, Sandra is no stranger to being sued for libel statements. In fact, she's been convicted of a few times of the very same accusations in which, she's always accused of. Yeah, she may have won some cases and she feel as if she's untouchable or that she was telling the truth the whole time. But you know what they say about people who lie often, that sometimes they start to believe their own truths, which is their lies, and they buy into it, and then they just can't help themselves. Now, again, I'm not one of those people who are going to be degrading character and degrading people. So I'm not here to do that about Sandra or anybody else. I'm just here to set the record straight. And the only reason why I feel the need to do that is because I work for myself. Everything that I do, I hustle for myself. So when someone says something that is not correct or out of context or is completely wrong, it's not that I feel the need to correct it. I am obligated to make sure that there is a mitigating factor to the statements that were made, especially when they're specifically um, aimed at myself. Now, what would normally happen when it was tit for tat is that it would be a character tear down against a character tear down. Not my platform, not my forte. I will just address the issues of what which is at hand, and what she said, and the fact that she said it out of context and she don't have no idea what she's talking about. Now, I'm still trying to figure out why the need to call my name, period, in this situation with Chris Saunders was relevant to be brought up. Now, again, as I mentioned, to each his own, and people say things and do things for their own personal reasons, and quite frankly, we can't control that. But what we can do is we can ensure that people don't continue to carry on in that behavior without being held accountable or go unchecked. So from what I gather, I haven't heard it for myself, which a close friend of mine called me and said what she said in regards to a contract that I had with the Dart Institution way back in 2012 when we were building the Badabanu Road connector. And the fact that she blew it completely out of proportion. She even had the time stamps and the dates. She said something about Hurricane Ivan and misappropriated funds and all these different things. The fact is that one, the contract that I had with DECO to provide material and equipment for the project that built that connector road from Indus Suites, which is where the Kempton is now, all the way to the Badabanu Road. I was just one of many contractors who had contracts to provide aggregate and equipment in order to facilitate the manpower and material to build that road. Now, she made reference that one of my trucks, well, she said trucks were burnt up. Again, when you don't have the facts and not interested in the facts, you are prone to speaking out of turn and speaking things that are not true. None of my trucks were burnt up. A truck was burnt in West Bay because the one person, which was a Caymanian driver, um, that I allowed to drive the truck to and from work because he didn't have a car and he lived in West Bay and the job was on that corridor, so it wasn't far away from the job site. I allowed him to drive the truck home in the evenings and drive it back to work in the mornings. Now, subsequently to me allowing that to happen, being the only driver that had the ability to do that, he had some conflict with someone and they had an argument and my truck got caught in the crossfires of that, which they thought it was his truck. So they retaliated on him. Truck got burnt. I suffered the loss and I had to end up rebuilding the truck and redoing it. So at the time, obviously, media spun it in the way that they wanted to. Probably the reason why Sandra got the misconception as to why it was burnt, and I don't know where she got plural from. But the reality is that Sandra claimed on her show that the reason the truck got burned is because I misappropriated funds. Well, it's funny how I could misappropriate funds on a job of that magnitude and never been brought up on charges, was never an issue, was never any public knowledge. So I don't understand where that came from. I guess it's just a figment of her imagination. And that's just how she understands that gossip in Cayman is a number one commodity, right? If we ever had anything to export, rumors and gossip would be number one on the list. But again, the fact that she could go out and say all of these liable statements, being a three-time convicted person of speaking things that are not truth and been sued and had to pay fines and pay monthly to pay them off, I find it very disappointing that she hasn't learned from her past mistakes that she's made and why she continued to bring up my name. And she can only bring up things that have happened in the past. And the funny thing with that is that I see Sandra occasionally in different places of public, and her and I have a very civil conversation. In fact, I saw her a week and a half ago, 2 weeks ago, over at the Blue Stone Coffee Shop, and we spoke and had a good conversation. But that aside, I'm just wondering why my name is relevant to the current situation with the now ex deputy premier and ex member of PAC government. And obviously, I understand why she's defending the position of Mr. Pannon because Mr. Pannon pays her to do a lot of his PR stuff, and there's nothing wrong with that. And I'm not saying that I have an issue with that. I'm just simply saying I get it, I understand it, but to bring my name up in context of it, I guess maybe she's trying to paint a picture that because me and Chris were friends, she want to paint some sort of scenario as if we're all doing the same thing, and then saying all these liable statements. Now I could easily pick up the phone and call my lawyer, let him listen to the show, and Sandra will be held accountable for making liable statement against me because I work for myself. I don't work for an institution. And whatever she say that has a negative impact on my credibility affects my livelihood. And I could easily sue Sandra and I could easily win. Why? Because Sandra have no basis of anything she said this morning in respect to the details of what she painted, the picture she painted. My trucks got burnt because I misappropriated funds on a DART deal that affected Hurricane Ivan. First of all, the timelines are totally off. Next year, 2024, will be 20 years since Hurricane Ivan. I had nothing to do with the Hurricane Ivan allocation of work. And MC Restoration, and I was like everybody else who had a dump truck, and I was working on it. I was contracted like everybody else. You understand? So I don't know where she got that from. But again, it just paints the picture. It goes back to the reality of her content, and I don't know why she insists on doing these things. I don't know, because all Sandra had to do was pick up the phone, call me. I could have given her the details, but she wasn't interested in that. She was interested in making me associated with Chris to try to paint some picture why Chris is no longer the deputy premier because he may have done something wrong. But let me just shed the light for people who don't really understand what's at stake here. And because I make it a point to make sure that anything I say is factual. Why don't the premier, or why didn't the premier make mention that him and Mr. Saunders had ongoing conflicts from inception, from the day that their horse trading was over and they created this thing called the PAC government? Well, first of all, I think everybody may have a short-term memory. The PAC government was formed and created by the existence of McKeever Bush during the time when McKeever Bush was in the smack middle of one of the biggest scandals as a politician. So if Mr. Panton is going to speak out of two sides of his mouth in regards to credibility or indicate, I don't know if he did or not, I don't pay attention to anything he do or Sandra, to be honest. But at the end of the day, why Mr. Panton haven't yet apologized to the Caymanian public in all constituencies of his marriage with McKeever Bush in order to form a government that he subsequently became premier of, and that the conflict and most of the conflicts between him and Mr. Saunders were because of Ofreg and because of Mr. Panton's conflicting interests in companies that he has shares in, such as C3 and Green Gas and all these other companies that Ofreg manages or oversees. The problem is that Mr. Panton will never paint that picture because it implicates him into maybe a conversation that we can have. Now, I'm not interested in what Mr. Saunders and Mr. Panton had from a personal standpoint and things that were said within the halls of parliament. I really don't care, to be honest with you. I personally don't care. But do you all remember the fiasco with Bernie Bush and the whole 2 week suspension that Wayne Panton put on him? That because Bernie Bush begged Wayne to keep him in when the governor were planning on removing him completely and didn't want to exercise his extreme power to do so. He left it up to Wayne. And Wayne suspended him for 2 weeks and kept him on as minister. Now, I find it very funny and very hypocritical that Bernie Bush, and I'm not going against Bernie, I'm just saying the violations that Bernie Bush had wasn't wasn't enough for them to remove him as minister, but there is some insinuation that is now floating about that Chris was forced to resign because of misconduct, or and I'm speaking hypothetically. I'm not saying that that's what it was, or because of behavior or whatever, condescending tone or being disrespectful. I don't know. All I know is that calling people Jamaican cockroaches, which I know the premier uttered out of his mouth, is something that is discriminatory and racist. But we don't hear about those stories. Why? Because nobody cared to ask that question. Why they had a press conference where you couldn't ask the question when you shaking up the government, when you destabilizing our image as a country who boasts the fifth largest financial center in the world, who've been struggling for umpteen donkey years to get off the OECD's grey list. But yet all of a sudden the minister of finance and the deputy premier resign effective immediately, but the premier can't give a reason why, and he don't want the reporters to ask the question, well, look, this is a black eye to the country. Why is this taking place? What forced or what compelled Mr. Saunders to resign at this particular juncture? You know how many meetings Mr. Saunders have or had maybe that was lined up for the rest of this week that he can no longer attend? So there had to be some drastic reason why this happened. Why the premier didn't think that the need of the public to understand what's happening to our country was not important. He let his personal needs overshadow the needs of the people. So at the end of the day, I'll make the first prediction for 2025 election. Wayne Panton will not be re-elected in the Newlands area for making comments like Jamaican cockroaches, because he made that comment. He made that comment to Mr. Saunders, in case nobody didn't care to ask the question. I told you all from inception that my first conversation with Wayne Panton in my entire life was at the Simboko restaurant on Country Corner, Savannah. And the first things that came out of Wayne Panton's mouth to Mario Rankin, who lived in Newlands just as long as anybody else, and I'm good friends with his two brothers, never talked to him in my life. His first utterance was, Mario, contrary, quote unquote, to popular belief or what people say, I'm not prejudiced. Well, let me just say this, ladies and gentlemen. If you're not prejudiced, you don't have to say you're not prejudiced. People who are not prejudiced don't have to say it. Now, having said that, back to what we're talking about. I don't know what happened in detail between Mr. Saunders and Mr. Panton. I really don't care because once it don't affect Mario Rankin's ability to provide for his family, I don't really business about them, you know. I just found it very disturbing that this morning I can get a call that Sandra Catron takes the need to mention my name in a capacity that she has no clue about. But again, that's not shocking for her because again, three-time convicted, liable statement person, she pay fines to various people because the court found her guilty. Marco Archer, Blake from Black Gold, all these people have sued and successfully sued Sandra. Matthew Leslie, they've all successfully sued Sandra for making libelous, lying statements on a public platform. But again, she continues to do so. Her segment today blatantly called me some sort of criminal for misappropriating funds. What funds are you referring to, Sandra? You just can't have some overlap story to accommodate your viewers who like gossip. I get it. There are more people around here that like gossip than people who actually like facts. And I don't have an issue with that. That's the nature of the beast. But we sit here this morning and I have to have a conversation about Sandra Catron making statements about things that she have no idea about, which is not out of the norm for her. She do it all the time. That's what she's about. I get it. And I'm really worried about that. Right? There are many things that I could say personally, but I don't do it because that's not who I am as a person. At one point, maybe we would have engaged in the back and forth, but I made a promise that I wouldn't do that. I'm here to clear the air, make sure that the proper information gets out, and the public have an opportunity to listen to an opposite the other side of the story. So back to why Mr. Saunders resigned effective immediately. Do anybody know why the premier didn't feel the need to inform the public fully on what took place, and then reappropriated responsibilities within ministries without ministers knowing? I know for a fact that Jay Ebanks was abroad and in transit to the Cayman Islands when this whole thing went down. The press conference took place, and all of these appropriations of moving responsibilities from ministry to ministry was done when a minister wasn't even on island and didn't even know what was taking place. Now, does that represent good governance, transparency? Does it? I don't think so. And then all of a sudden, one of the Teflon dons of all of this, John Seymour, is a now minister. Man, let me tell you something. So I find it very, very funny that Sandra Catron didn't even mention John Seymour's name this morning, who a person who she used to rag on all the time, conveniently left to the side. And I good friends with John. I'm glad and I'm happy for him that he's a minister. No, don't get me wrong. I'm just simply saying, don't you all see the convenience of the topics in which she is speaking about? She's trying to solidify the position that the premier and the government has now taken after the fact by curtailing the story to accommodate. You mentioned my name in the light of regards that I'm some kind of dishonest person, and using it while you talking about the immediate effect resignation of the premier, or the deputy premier, and the minister of finance. What relevance does it have? What connection did you have? Me and him friends? Sandra, you telling me that you never ever sat down and had coffee with a criminal? Well, no, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. You've had coffee and breakfast, lunch, and dinner with a person who will be convicted of telling lies every day of your life for the rest of your life because you are that person. That's a downside to this. And you know, the funny thing is, and the thing that really blows my mind, the thing that really blows my mind is how accommodating you are to the things that you find the need to talk about. I mean, you come up with, hey, Sandra, truth be told, you could have been a good book writer. You could have been a good storyteller. If you was to give that up and write books, let me tell you something, bestseller. You understand? Because you know how to tell a story. You know how to create a story. Believe me when I tell you, you have a lot of talent in that category. But at the end of the day, we got to sit down and look at the impacts of what happened yesterday. Because I'm not concerned about what Wayne's personal issue is with Chris, and I don't give a damn about what Chris' personal issues is with Wayne. I don't. The country shouldn't. But when we talk about the impacts of the outside international community, and the reason why that's important because two pillars of our economy is financial service industry and tourism, two things that hinge on reputation, right? You think if Cayman was deemed as one of the dangerous locations in the world, you think we'd have the amount of tourists we have? No. You think if Cayman was deemed as this big melting pot of corruption that we'll have the amount of investment inward bound that we have? No. So we must maintain at all levels a good perception, regardless of what in-house feud that we have in amongst ourselves. You realize that here we are as local people, fighting at the hip every day while the international community is running away with the bucket of gold. We need to be careful how we decide, or we pick sides, or we choose sides, and who we're going to talk about and who we're not going to talk about. The fact that Chris Saunders, the former deputy premier and the former minister of finance and the former member of PAC government, has exited this institution is a black eye in itself. We should be asking the question, why did the person feel the need to have immediate resignation, exiting of the PAC government? That's the gorilla in the room. But no, we're gonna have platforms that are gonna start doing character build tear down so that they can justify it, so that we can have our own personal gratitude from an emotional standpoint. And that's what we need to avoid. We need to get away from the fact that these are the things that are driving the narrative in our country. I always said, and I said on my show many, many times, the whole situation with Ofreg and the conflicting interest that the premier have. Now, I know that these things were declared during nomination day or whenever it was, you had to declare these things before you went to politics. I get it. But declaring that you have interest in something doesn't mean that you're going to avoid conflict. You realize that Chris Saunders was the minister in charge of Ofreg. So whatever reform Ofreg needed and whatever implications that he wanted to put in, I'm sure that they were being watched very closely. Now, I'm not telling you that Ween had some interference. I'm not saying any of that. I'm just simply saying that if there was anything that Mr. Saunders wanted to implement at Ofreg that didn't suit the overall picture of what Mr. Panton seen, maybe he may have had an interest and had somebody else champion his interest, because he's not the only partner in C3. There are multiple partners. So he could have probably went to them, or they could have probably come to him and say, hey, this is an issue for us, right? Nobody can tell me that Mr. Panton didn't have subsequent meetings with all his subsidiary companies that he has shares in to talk about the future, the growth, and the infrastructure of his companies. And then you have a minister who happens to be the deputy premier, who's in charge of one of the institutions for policing the same entities in which you are a shareholder in. That's a direct conflict of interest. The problem is that nobody asks the question, including the platform, in which always very critical about everybody else's behavior. That's the thing that I don't understand. Sandra talked about Kenneth not wanting to take off his shoes. She talked about not wanting to take off his shoes at the Cayman Brac airport. What relevance that got to do with the overall impact of the Cayman Islands? I don't care. I'm not interested in about no minister having some attitude over taking off shoes. I don't care. You understand? That don't bring down the cost of milk and bread and meat. That don't bring down the cost of energy and all of the high cost of living we got. I don't care about a minister having an issue with don't want to take off his shoes. Should he done it or he should not done it? I don't care either way. I don't care either way. It's a domestic flight. How many people that come on boat to the Cayman Islands that leave Cayman and go to the Brac, they got to take off their shoes? Tell me. Because it's the inner island flight. But again, I don't really care. That's not important. Now, at the end of the day, we have growing situation where people just don't understand what's taking place. And because we have misinformation being advocated on platforms that a lot of people follow or listen. And the problem with it is that I don't have a problem with somebody just say something that's responsible and say something that is factual. The fact that Sandra Catron found the need to say, oh, well, Chris is friends with Mario Rankin and he had a contract where he misappropriated funds, why they burnt up his trucks. What is she talking about? That is so far from the truth. Where is the evidence that I misappropriated any funds when it came to projects that I did? When I worked on that project for Deco, you listen to me good? Every single truck driver that worked under that contract got paid in full every 2 weeks. Oh, and by the way, I was the only contractor that was a part of that consortium for providing material and equipment. I was the only one. All the other ones sat on their hand and kept quiet. I the only one that challenged Ray Howe when he wanted to water down the prices for equipment and wanted to continue to pay X amount of dollars per yard delivery because that's what he set in stone, not realizing that particular time the cost of diesel had went through the roof and I was trying to get increased per yard delivery so that they could have compensated to pay for diesel. Mario Rankin is the one that put that in place. And by the way, the system that they have in place now down at DECO, where everybody produce their own trade and business license and their own liability insurance, they get a contract independently to work under the DECO banner whenever they're doing big projects. I put that in place. I would the one that advocated for that. I would the one that created that environment. The problem is that nobody cared to talk about, nobody cared to go out and interview all the truck drivers and equipment owners that I helped and I made sure and I bent over back ways. In fact, I took all the heat for getting them the price points and getting all of the things that they needed. I was the one that put that in place. Mario Rankin. I wasn't looking no gratitude. I wasn't looking no tap on the shoulder. This is the first time that I am speaking about it, simply because we have absent-minded, whether it be by by deliberate action or non-deliberate. We got absent-minded people who choose to go out and talk about things that they don't have a clue about at all. I don't care about the things that don't affect this public. I care about the things that do. And if we're going to have a conversation, let's have a conversation about that. Wayne Panton, I can tell you right now, has lost the plot. He has lost the connection. He was never connected, to be honest with you, when it comes to the public. You create a thing called community creates country. In what country are you talking about? When I was in the neighborhoods of Savannah, Newlands since 1994, Mr. Panton, let me just throw this out there for you. And Sandra Catron, you wasn't even in Cayman at the time. So let me just paint this picture for you. From 1994, I moved into the Savannah, Newlands area. I've been a part of the senior citizens parties. I've been a part of the Pirates Week float parades. I've been a part of all of the non-profit organizations and the non-alcoholic parties that we had at the Savannah Play Field. I was a part of all the community service and works. We built that community. And we in Panton, you lived and worked in that community longer than I have. You lived and worked and you lived in that community longer than I've been there. And you never once showed your face until you decided to run for politics. You've never been to a senior citizen party until you got into politics. You never helped anybody to do anything until you wanted to run for politics. You never wanted to run for politics until you left Walker's with a mandate. So don't come ripping off no story to Mario about community creates country. And then you lobbied for Heather Borden, who worked alongside of us all those years, Miss Katie, God rest her heart and soul, all of those people who worked diligently. And I don't care what anybody wants to say. Heather Borden has always been a community server in this country from day one. You convinced her to run for politics again so that you can put her in there just to make up numbers. Because she ain't doing anything any different from what she did for the last 40 years. She's always been a stellar community worker. And you turned her into a political stooge so that you can use her as numbers. Believe me when I tell you, that in itself is what I had a major issue with. But the problem is that you don't see it because you believe smarter than everybody else. You believe that everybody's beneath you. You made me feel that way the first time I talked to you. You told me out of your own mouth, Mr. Panton, that you are a product of white privilege. God could kill me dead on the spot if I'm telling a lie. And I challenge you to disagree and say that you didn't say it, but happen. You see, a lot of you don't know that Mario Rankin records all his conversations with people I don't trust, including you. You told me that you are a product of white privilege. That when you and your mother and father was on the airport in Miami, you ran into Mr. Walker. Mr. Walker asked you what you were doing. You were going to an engineering school and to go to college. And he said, well, the door always open for you to be a lawyer. And that's how you became a lawyer at Walker's, because you considered that being white privilege. Now, I didn't see that being white privilege. I saw that Mr. Walker were handing out a favor to a federal lodge brother. That's all I saw. But you can call it whatever you want. But the fact that you think and you thought that you are a product of white privilege, that blew my mind right after making the statement that you're not prejudiced. Let me tell you something. People need to understand what it is we're dealing with. We need heroes in this country that fight and champion causes in this country. We don't need emotional, hypocritical, narcissistic politicians who always want to have the final say. But let me tell you something. 2025 not far away, And I can guarantee you this, Mr. Panton, you will never be re-elected in the Newlands constituency. Remember, I tell you that. I'm telling you that right now. Because you see them same Jamaican cockroaches that you referred to Mr. Saunders, they are a large voting bloc in the Newlands area. I can guarantee you that. And the endorsement that I gave you, you may think that endorsement didn't help you, but let me tell you something. The election before that, you lost to Alva Saku. The election after that I endorsed you, you won by 200 votes. Don't ever take for a moment the reality of your existence. Don't ever do it. Believe me when I tell you. So at the end of the day, we're gonna have a conversation about the black eye our country got yesterday. You didn't deliver the black eye, you know. Chris Saunders delivered the black eye. You imagine that? What we should be asking, the question we should be asking as a general public from all 19 constituencies, what would compel a deputy premier and the minister of finance, right, who have beat all odds as a Jamaican descendant and a Caymanian descendant to get to a position in his life, what would compel him to resign and step away and effective immediately? Because if the premier don't have some smoking gun to say we forced him out, then the reason for him leaving must be on his own volition and his own reasons as to why he had to leave. Why we not asking that question? Because right now, I want to know what would compel anybody, but more importantly, somebody of Chris' background and Chris' stature to leave a post of deputy premier and minister of finance. That is the question Mario Rankin want to know. Because I'm concerned. I'm concerned that the issue must have been so great. But yet, I can't understand. And boy, let me tell you something. We got some whitewash Caymanians around here, you know. Believe me when I tell you, you know. And that monkey see, monkey do, you know. Mm-mm. That's not how it work around here. Mm-mm. No, 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 no. It's called bandwagon. We got some bandwagon people around this place. Believe me when I tell you. But at the end of the day, again, I made sure that I addressed the issues and only the issues. There's no personal attacks. There's no nothing. The problem is that we have an issue and we need to fix the problem. The problem is that now we have a government in turmoil. What's going to happen? They get up there and announce all these different ministries and allocations. Kenneth used to be in charge of transportation. No longer. No longer. Kenneth not in charge of transportation no more. Oh, he got ports and tourism. Was that a demotion? I don't know. Transportation now is transferred to J. So J Ministries now is now heavier than they were. Right? And believe me when I tell you, you know, don't think that Jay and Kenneth and Ween Pannon are bosom buddies, and they've all buckheads. Every one of them, Ween have buckheads with everybody in there. So who next? Who next? Do we have a stable government? Because they made an announcement of the reshuffling of ministries. And then he talking about Julie being the deputy premier and the Brackers need to be proud that she the new deputy premier. Let me just call a spade a spade. What in the world did Juliana O'Connor Conley done for Cayman that is meaningful and substantial? Tell me, pave roads in the Brack? Pave every road Cayman Brack had? That what she done? Now, I got a lot of respect for Miss Julie, and I talked to her too. But at the end of the day, we got to call a spade a spade. So nobody else in the PAC government outside of Julie, who was an adopted person from the PPM, you telling me that they couldn't make somebody else deputy premier? Ask yourself this question. Why nobody other than Miss Julie is deputy premier? That one I need to ask on yourself. Yeah. That one I need to ask on yourself. But at the end of the day, you're going to hear everybody coming out the bushes. Well, why were I'm not saying anything wrong with Miss Julie. I'm just telling you that that job could have gone to anybody in that PAC government. And I can tell you right now, let's put all of the tick marks next to the people and what they've done. So I don't understand the whole boastiness of, oh, we got a new government. No, I understand that they're trying to represent a stable government and whatnot. I get it. You know, we need to do that from an international standpoint. But I want to know what the governor's comments are. He not dip out yet. When he leave end of March, he still got time. What the governor's statement is. I want to hear what the governor gonna say about all this. Of course, he gonna toe the party lines, and that's his job. Foreign Commonwealth responsibility is to ensure good governance, right? So how is it good governance for a deputy premier, minister of finance to just up and resign effective immediately? The governor should want to know why in the world that took place. What compelled a person to go to those extremes? That in itself spells unstable government. And we need to remedy this problem. So if we're going to sit down and just take shots at Chris Saunders for resigning and calling him all kind of names because he speak and sound and have a little Jamaican heritage in him. Listen to me telling us something. I'm telling you something. We are shining the light in the wrong direction. I think that Chris also have a responsibility to tell the public why he left. Because if it were me, I would come in out guns swinging. I would have resigned, yes, and I would have told him why. And I would have had a press conference before the premier had a chance to. But again, I want to know why none of these things took place. I want to know why you're gonna have a press conference, but the media can't ask no questions. We in Pannon had a press conference and nobody couldn't ask no questions. Well, Mr. Panton, could you please shed some more light on the reason why Mr. Saunders left and why he left abruptly, effective immediately? So we're left with all of this speculation. We're left with all of this uncertainty. We're left with what's really going on in our government. Now, granted, I know some people that only gave this government 1 year to last. I mean, they last one whole year more than what most people predicted. So, touche. But it doesn't change the fact that our government and our people and our and everybody is at odds trying to figure out what's going on. You know, the thing is that I've said it on this show many times. There are no enemies in politics. There are no enemies in politics. And don't and listen, don't think for a moment that the PPM didn't have a meeting last night. Oh, the PPM had a meeting. I guarantee you that. The moment they heard that, they start calling in the troops. Listen, gather the troops. Time to start figuring out what's going on and what we can do to infiltrate. You hear what I tell you? Believe me when I tell you. So if you think the horse trading over, no, it just started. It just started. Right back to election night. Horse trading has restarted because the opposition smelled blood. Miss Jula and Roy McTaggart won the airport a week and a half ago, side by side. Yeah. So believe me when I tell you, stranger things has happened, and there are no enemies in politics when they all want the same thing. They're willing to put aside everything. You know why I know that's true? The PPM took McKeever in the height of foolishness, and the PAC government took McKeever in the height of foolishness. They all swallowed their pride and everything just so that they could have get the majority seats in the House so that they can run the country. Believe me when I tell you, they set aside all of those differences just for power. So there's no enemies in politics. So at the end of the day, how do we interpret what has happened, what is transpiring before our very eyes? And then we have platforms out there just asking stupidness, and that's fine. And I guess you got to have a little element of everything, right? While in the meantime of all of this turmoil, people still can't afford to pay the utilities, to pay their mortgage, the regular necessities of life, food and gas. People still struggling with that, right? So whether or not there's a shakeup in government, there's nothing that has been implemented that's going to have any great change. Now we see a lot of things that was supposed to happen. Now let me paint a scenario for you, and I'm not going to speak hypothetically, and it's just food for thought, right? All right. So check this out. We know that there have been a lot of lobbyists to build 20-story and above buildings, right or wrong. I think I'm right on that. And secondly, I know that Chris Saunders and a few other members were advocating for 20-story buildings. I think they asked for 50 and they settled on 20, right? It's just like selling a car. If you want $20,000, you ask 40. So that the person that beat you down to 20 feel like they got a deal. But you really got what you wanted. That's kind of like what's happening with the 20-story buildings in Cayman. They really wanted 20 stories, so they asked for 50. And guess who they use as a pawn to ask for 50? Makiwa Bush, the person who got the most controversy surrounding him. He submitted the motion to go to 50 stories, and then cabinet came down and said, oh, we'll do 20. But I can guarantee you that Wayne Pannon didn't want to do no 20. And you know what? I support Wayne in that regard. Or I support anybody in government that don't want to build 20-story buildings. We are already at 10. We shouldn't go no higher. But that's my personal belief and wants. But what I'm thinking is that I know for sure that there was a huge push for the 20-story buildings for Dart, Frank Schilling, and all these people who wanted high-rise buildings. I know this for a fact. And I know that Chris and Kenneth and a couple of them were aligned with that. So I'm wondering now if there was some sort of hit button that added on to the already off-reg situation that Chris and Wayne had. I'm wondering if that was one of the determining factors why Ween and the deputy premier were bucking heads. That could have been, but no, but not talking about that. That's just a scenario I'm throwing out there because I know that those things were in motion. The problem is that we see a lot of movement. I see where the PPM issue a statement about the cargo port and the cruise port, and I'm saying to myself, the PPM really think that we're gonna allow them to wiggle their way back in with the idea of building a cruise port in Georgetown if we move cargo. No, 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 that's not gonna ever happen because the election office still have registered number of people that triggered that referendum. And if we need to enforce having a referendum so that we can vote on it and determine either way, that's what we'll do. So that I'm not worried about. What I'm worried about is how we shoulder to shoulder and elbow to elbow with certain institutions again, and then we have strategic policies and policy statements and then strategic rebuttals coming from the opposition in regards to the existence of cruise and cargo being in the same location. We all know that they both can't coexist. If you look behind me on my screen, you'll see the cargo port, right? You'll see it. And you'll also see that there's a cruise ship parked to the left of it. What that tells you, that cruise ship and all its passengers have to call to that port. You seeing the cargo activity going on there? So let's just say Cayman never had no food and there was a cargo ship out there waiting to come in to be discharged. We would have to wait to eat until that cruise ship exit the country. That's how critical it is. So make no mistake, that port and the redevelopment of the port and the existence of having cargo and cruise on the same port is a real conversation that need to be had. We need to move cargo out of Georgetown so that there's no disruption in our food supplies and our medical supplies and the things that we need to have a stable country. So please take the political emotions out of it, take the stupidity out of it, because these are the conversations that need to be had. But nobody don't want to have that conversation. It's just like the quarry owners. Every one of them lobby for the government to maintain not letting aggregate come into the country, non-processed aggregate and and whatnot, simply because it can cut into their ability to blow holes in our land and supply material that is compromising our ecosystem. But nobody don't want to talk about that. I want to know where all of the scientists is that trying to stop the east-west arteria because of the edge of the wetlands that we're going to be affecting. Where you all are when they're drilling 50 feet down 150 holes and stuffing it with fertilizer, dynamite, and blasting a hole and digging it out. Where on is when they're doing that? Listen, I don't care which quarry owner have a problem with Mario Rankin saying this morning that we need to stop quarrying on our island because we don't have anything to quarry. We ain't got no hills and no mountains. We digging below to get material to build roads and schools and developments and all that, which is needed. But what I'm saying is that we have a neighboring country in Jamaica that have unlimited resources that could provide that material. We even made them blast a crater in the bluff. You go to Cayman Brac right now, and at the beginning of the bluff, there is a hole that you can put everybody in Cayman in and cover them up, and you wouldn't even know they were there. I'm telling you, ladies and gentlemen, we got to stop this reality of destroying everything we got just so we can attain a little bit of financial wealth. We need to build a relationship with Jamaica and neighboring countries that have the resources for us to get that material to continue the development that we need, right? We can do it. It's very easy. We bring material from those countries now, gravel and sand and whatnot to mix ready mix. So at the end of the day, the conversation need to be on the table, and we need strong politicians who are not cowards and who are not willing to succumb to the almighty lobbyist dollar to keep things the way they are. Because if you have sectors of society that are immensely benefiting from what's in place now, then we know who are the problem. Because if they're the ones benefiting from the system the way it is, they're the ones that are going to try to keep it the way it is. But at the end of the day, who do we get to champion these causes? Supposedly the duly elected people that we elect to do what's in the best interest of the people, but we never see that happen. And now we having these conversations talking about Chris Saunders and Wayne Pannon and this one and that one, and I don't understand. And the thing is that I think people fail to understand, right? Is that what's at stake? the impacts, how we're going to impact us, and what's moving forward. Now, let me paint a picture for you all. What's stopping the PPM from horse trading or poaching people from the PAC government? Yo, PPM got 7 people, you know. All they need is 3 to have the majority, and they got the government. I'm not telling you that Chris can go over there, but who says he can't? So that 8, let's just say hypothetically they got 8. Then you got Jay, then you got Kenneth, then you got McKeever, then you got Isaac. If all of them decide to come across, what we ain't gonna do then? I hope he got some chum so he can go fishing because he got have all the time in the world then. But let me tell you something. If they think that we're gonna get us this country out of the issues we're in by all these social programs I see them trying to put in place and implement, let me tell you something. They make a sad mistake. We got real issues that need to be addressed. We got real problems that need to be taken care of. And I don't see this PAC government being capable of doing it. I haven't seen them do anything that other than I see Jay doing a lot of work. I see Kenneth did a lot of work. But at the end of the day, this constant fight, constant fight. So we need to make sure that there are things that are prioritized in our country, and we need to champion them, and we need to see it all the way through and stop the political bickering, because the people are the ones that get in the political whiplash from it. We're the ones that suffering in the consequences in which they create or not create, and we need to fix that problem. We need to fix major question. And number two, important that we continue to talk about these issues and make sure that we bring them to the forefront, and that we don't have an issue that we currently seeing now. Because, but let me tell you something, Cayman can't afford to drop the ball on anything that we're doing now. People are suffering, and at the end of the day, Jamal, I'm not sure if I can't see what's going on here. Are we live still? All right. No, we have a little technical difficulties here, especially on my end on this computer. But I just want to make sure that, yeah, okay, there. Um, one of the issues that I find that is currently happening is where when we have a problem that is affecting our small people, we see very little motivation to address it the way they address when something affecting the big people, right? If they put the same emphasis on helping the man on the bottom as they do with the man on the top, I think we'd be all right. But we never see that. We never see them prioritize that. We never have the opportunity to see the small man take priority. We don't see it. They do all of these little band-aid, kick the can down the road fixes to tell themselves that they're helping the man on the bottom. But they're not really helping the man on the bottom because they're always focused on the man on the top. And trickle-down economics never really helped anybody. That was a poor system of analogy in which they put in place. But again, I just want to make sure that we understand clearly that we are at a crossroads. We are at a point where anything can happen at this point, right? Because don't think for a moment that the possibility of change of government isn't real. It is real. We got 2 years and change left before the next general election. There's a lot of time because the last 2 years, a lot of things happened, a lot of things didn't happen, and then yesterday we had a grenade that dropped in the room. So we need to be very, very careful on what we're doing. We have to be careful. We have to be focused, and we must understand our surroundings. So at the end of the day, it's unfortunate that any minister would feel a need to resign effective immediately. I don't care who it was, right? That's an unfortunate scenario. And I think that the premier and the people who are still in charge could have done a better job on informing and enlightening the public as to what's going on. Because at not one point did I hear in Wayne's speech that he reassured the public that our interest is still at the forefront. He never said that. All he said was that we good, or that his government. Anyway, it doesn't matter. He didn't make me feel confident. I can tell you that. I never had none before that, and even less now when I saw the address. Especially when they didn't make reporters ask questions, because I'm sure those reporters. I know when the ledger will ask some major questions, right? Now I know those that are in there that wasn't going to ask any questions. But again, at the end of the day, how do we get around this, right? I wanted to talk today about energy and the things that are on the horizon that we can do. I mean, I see all of these initiatives and stuff that's going on, and when it comes to alternative and whatnot. And again, I still trying to figure out why in the world we don't have a proper structure in place when it comes to consumption of energy. I just checked some of the messages right quick. I don't know what's going on here, but I don't think I got planned, but anyway. Morning, everyone. What happened to Minister Saunders? He resigned. They should have gave the Minister Jay a chance. They didn't give him no chance, the Deputy Premier. No, they gave it straight to Julie. Julie already been Deputy Premier and Premier. I don't know. At the end of the day, I guess they think it looks better. But anyway, he resigned from being Deputy Premier and from his Ministry of Finance and being a part of PAC government team. Yep, that's what he did. Donald Richards, thank you for clarifying that. Jonathan Powell, I saw you on the other page there commenting too. I think the Chinese own most of that material in Jamaica. The Chinese don't own almost. Listen, first of all, Jonathan, let me let's address some things. You say a lot of things that don't make no sense, and you don't do proper research. What material did the Chinese own in Jamaica? Since you say you think the Chinese own majority of the material in Jamaica, point out which material you're referring to. Because I can tell you, I've been doing business in Jamaica for a long time, in and out of quarries, and I can assure you, there's a lot of quarries in there that they don't have no control in. So please, when you make a statement on here, please come from facts. Stop speaking off the hip as if you don't know what you're talking about. You understand? When you want to go to a platform that they just talk foolishness whenever they want just to get attraction, you go back to Sandra website where you was earlier. Go back over there. Over here, we call a spade, and we talk facts over here. Let me just be the first one to tell you that publicly. Anyway, but at the end of the day, it is what it is. People love to sensationalize headlines so that they can get involved. Yeah, this thing chipping out, in and out, Jamal. Look like back on. Well, keep reloading here. And I hear Jonathan saying that it's chipping out. Oh, anyway, I don't know what's going on with the feed, the connection. If it's chipping out, my apologies. I don't own the provider. I don't control the network. I just work with what we got. Yeah. So again, ladies and gentlemen, I'm sorry that we had to address the issues in which we had to address this morning because none of it helps our overall position and where we are in our country. But sometimes, we have to find the time and the need to address issues that were said that are non-relevant and libelous. Some people just don't learn. But one of the most important things is that we keep the dialogue going, we keep the platform open, and we continue the conversations. So Friday we'll have hopefully a whole new fresh segment on. Maybe I can convince Chris to come on and give his side of the story on a platform that calls a spade, and we shoot straight. And those are the things that we need to focus on anyway, entirely. However, what I would really like to see happen in the very near future is that we don't constantly react to things. We try to be more proactive and prevent most of the things that we are reactive to. So what we'll do on Friday, we'll try to do an overall recap of the week and what has transpired. Maybe I can I can have an opportunity to talk to Chris and kind of get his side of the story and get a little bit more insight as to what compelled him to do what he did. So, but for now, even we experiencing a bunch of breaking up here. So I'm gonna sign off now so we can get ready for Friday. Again, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for tuning in and liking our page, being a part of the thing. Don't forget to share it if you see the need. We got a YouTube channel you can go back and watch it on if your friends don't have Facebook, which a lot of people don't. So until Friday, we'll see you again. Enjoy the rest of your Wednesday. We got to break Sariba up. Sariba is a cartel. We have to own our grid because we paid for it. You had it too long. That's number one.
We need to control the purchasing of fuel because we pay for it, we should be in charge of buying it. The fuel companies, you better buckle up too. Jackson Point Pipeline have to be reverted back to the ownership of the country. Oh, Mario, you can't tell them how to operate their business. Well, yes, we can. Having this idea that you're going to impose what's best because of what the law tells you can do will cause an uprising in this country that you've never seen before. My children are going to be saddled with the debt of a billionaire so that he can have his name printed on everything we got around here. Because let me tell you something, this is Dart Island.